Hello and welcome to the Joe Ligato Show. I'm your host, Dr. Joe Ligato, and today we're going to be talking about this really interesting report that I kind of skimmed over and decided we need to talk about. And it is on the hidden tribes of America. And so this is a year-long project showing that from More in Common that was launched in October 2018. And so we're just going to review this and see what we think about it. Okay, so it starts off talking about how America has never felt so divided. There's bitter debates. It's on TV. It's in your Facebook feeds. It's an us versus them mentality. Very tribal, hence the name of this. So they asked more than 8,000 Americans in one of the country's largest ever studies on polarization. Okay, so more than 3 in 4 Americans also believe that our differences aren't so great that we can't work together. Those 3 in 4 Americans are wrong. People's differences are so great that they cannot work together. That is something we've learned throughout history. You have to have things in common, things that I call unifying forces that keep people together. And if you don't have enough unifying forces, people will not stay together. We saw this in Yugoslavia even. Yugoslavia is a place where these people, these Southern Slavic people, are so closely related, they're pretty much like second cousins to each other. And despite cultural ties, despite civilizational ties, despite ethnic ties, they had religious differences, and that alone, not having that one unifying force in common, religion, was enough to cause differences, and it caused them to kill each other. Granted, they did have help from the West fomenting those tensions, but we do know definitively throughout history that diversity is not our strength. Unifying forces are our strength. Okay, that's... I don't know. Americans, Westerners are so indoctrinated, they don't understand that there is an infinite or near infinite amount of examples where unifying forces do matter. They do make things better. Americans, though, I don't want to get too much on a tangent here. Americans, though, they watch movies like Star Wars, where it's a ragtag bunch of very different individuals working together to fight against a very collectivistic group, a very homogeneous group. And the ragtag group always wins. They use their differences to win the day. That is a movie. I can't emphasize this enough. I don't think Americans understand this. I don't think Westerners understand this. That is a propagandist movie that completely contradicts reality. That is not how things work in reality whatsoever. I'll be the first to admit, I wish that was reality. I wish we didn't need as many unifying forces in order to build functioning societies. But you do need unifying forces to build functioning societies. Things like having heterogeneous societies just have simply not worked any time throughout history. You cannot point to a time throughout history where it did work. And in fact, major civilizations have collapsed due to having not enough homogeneous forces, unifying forces. The Roman Empire, the Soviet Union, Yugoslavia, this has happened numerous times throughout history. This is not something new that you're just figuring out now, okay? Okay, so let's move on. So a nation divided, a range of major issues split the country. Research concludes that we have become a set of tribes with different codes, values, and even facts. Okay, we don't care about any of this stuff. Okay, so a majority of Americans whom we've called the exhaustive majority are fed up by America's polarization. They know they have more in common than that which divides us. Our belief in freedom, equality, and the pursuit of the American dream. Okay, so let's just take this apart because they're wrong here again, which is that Americans definitively have, how do I put this? I don't want to use the example I came up with. Okay, so Americans have more in common than that which divides them, but the things that divide them are very important things. And so those are things that you can't really bridge a gap for, or it's extremely difficult to do so, and it would be better just to not do so in a lot of cases. I hate to put it in those terms, but people, okay, so when we talk about things we have in common, Human beings breathe. They eat food. Those are things in common. So yeah, sure. If you're looking at those things, we do have things in common. But then the things we disagree about are fundamental core values such as abortion or the criminal justice system. Should we be a rehabilitative system or a punishment-based system? These things that are really worth strongly disagreeing over. And so when they say we have more in common than that which divides us, it's a very empty phrase, because you could point to things like breathing. Human beings breathe, and say that's something we have in common. And they have like red blood cells. Like, you could point to a number of things that don't matter that we have it in common, but then you can point to things that do seriously matter that we don't have in common. And there's very few of them, but they do matter a lot more than the things that we have in common. Okay. Then we can just go on to say our belief in freedom. I don't think Americans have the same conception of what freedom is. I actually think they disagree about that strongly. Equality. Americans do not agree on equality. In fact, a significant amount of Americans at this point believe in equity and they mistake it for equality, or they believe in equality and they mistake it for equity, and they just don't even know what they believe in a lot of cases. So I don't think I would agree with that at all. And then the pursuit of the American dream. So we know quantifiably there's an objective reality here. And America is not a country where you move up the socioeconomic ladder particularly easily compared to other countries. And so there is not an American dream. So, man, this video already feels very dark, but this is the truth of the matter. There's everything they're saying here is a lie. Okay, they share a deep sense of gratitude that they are citizens of the United States of America. That is, again, quantifiably not true. We know younger Americans are not proud of being an American. We know this. We have studies on this. Okay. Turning the tide of tribalism is possible, but it won't be easy. To understand better what is pulling us apart and find what can bring us back together. Okay, so they have the report here. Today's polarization reflects a perfect storm. Unsettling changes in our economy and society have left many Americans feeling like strangers in their own land. Old certainties are gone. Secure job, growing wage, safety of neighborhood life where everyone knew each other. These all feel like relics of bygone era. Okay, so you don't have a job, so you can't afford to live. You're not getting a wage increase if you do have a job, so you can't afford to live. And you're not safe in your neighborhood. They're like, they just like brush that aside, like, oh, don't worry about those things. Like, this article's funny. Hidden tribes. And then they go on to say, it feels as though hard work is no longer rewarded. Okay, we have information on this. I talk about this all the time. In about 1970, the 1970s, productivity and compensation got completely decoupled. So productivity has gone up for the average American, but compensation has not gone up. So saying it feels as though hard work is no longer rewarded, that is quantifiable objective reality. It's not, I feel, it's we can measure this. We have measured this. And then going on to say, and the gap between rich and poor widens every year. Yes, it does. Yeah, it does. In fact, the COVID pandemic, which saw a lot of suffering, particularly among the working class who couldn't go to work and couldn't feed their family and weren't given some other form of income to compensate for that, they suffered greatly, while the oligarch class, made up primarily of Zionists, benefited massively from the pandemic. So there's a widening gap there. Okay. Okay, so they talk about news feeds here and how people don't trust each other. People see others as stupid, wrong, or even evil. Okay, so let's take that for example. If there is, if we believe in moral relativism, sure, there's nothing wrong. But if we believe in some form of moral absolutism, that there is right and wrong, yes, yeah. If I say something and I think I'm right, and I believe in moral absolutism, then that means that you are wrong if you believe something differently, unless I have a misperception there, in which case I'm wrong. I don't believe in moral relativism, and so one of us has to be wrong at the end of the day with our beliefs. In some cases. In other cases, yeah, there is some degree of moral relativism there. People who disagree are stupid, or other people's views are stupid. Okay, so we know that up until the 1990s, there was something called the Flynn effect. So people became more and more intelligent over time. Particularly in America, these studies were done. But since the 90s, IQ scores, intelligence quotient scores, have been going down. So if you think nowadays that the persons you disagree with are morons, they actually typically are morons, because more morons are being created every year. And there's so far we found nothing that we can really do about this situation. But yes, if you feel like more people are incompetent nowadays, that is objective reality. If we take IQ as a strong predictor for academic performance, job performance, things like that, which IQ is a strong indicator of academic performance and job performance. When you say that people are evil, yeah, they are, in a lot of cases. So we know that in the baby boomer generation, which still controls America, they still make up the influential class of America. They still hold all the wealth in America, or I shouldn't say all the wealth. They hold a significant portion of the wealth, and they have not passed it on to later generations. They have a higher degree of psychopathy than other generations that have existed that we've been able to study. So they are eviler than other generations. Yes, the people in charge are definitely eviler. And I think there's a belief based off of movies and TV shows and stuff like that, that good will triumph over evil, even if good really doesn't actively fight against evil. And that is not the case. Evil wins very frequently. In fact, because of the fact that evil is willing to do more things in order to get ahead, they have a larger toolbox. They have more options for getting ahead in life because they are willing to do and consider more things. And so evil quite frequently wins, and it does win a lot in modern times. And there's a lot of evidence of this too. A lot of evidence that I'm not even really able to cite anymore because evil has taken over a lot of social media, media and entertainment technologies and corporations. So yeah, I can't go into more detail about that. Okay, so we are being played off each other. Yes, that is definitely the case where the poor people are being pitted against each other and the oligarchs are watching, and they're making sure that the poor people don't rally together against the oligarchs. And that's pretty definitively what's happening. If you look at studies, we are an oligarchical society, and democracy is not influential. The majority opinion is not influential in terms of getting things like policy changes. Okay. All right, so let's see what else they have to say. Okay, so they say they used an advanced statistical process called hierarchical clustering. It's just a dimension reduction technique to identify groups of people with similar core beliefs. I used a dimension reduction technique called Gaussian mixture models for my dissertation, so I know all about this stuff. Okay, so they say there are 7 groups of Americans, what we call the hidden tribes. I'm going to be really interested to see if I agree with this alignment. I mean, it is statistically derived, so it's accurate, but let's see how many of these I can kind of pick out or have picked out in the past. Okay, so, okay. Here's a quick snapshot of each group. The progressive activists, and they make up 8% of the population, are deeply concerned with issues concerning equity, fairness, and America's direction today. They tend to be more secular, cosmopolitan, and highly engaged with social media. Okay, these people control a large swath of modern society and the direction of modern society. I'm surprised it's actually as high as 8% here, but something to consider here is equity means you can't have both equity and equality. They are not the same things, okay? They nearly always contradict each other. And so if you believe in equity, you do not believe in equality. Things like fairness, it'd be really interesting to see what they mean by fairness here. From what I've read of other studies, the people who say these things typically do not actually mean fairness. They're just trying to bully other people. They tend to have high degrees of authoritarianism, narcissism, things like that. Okay, they are concerned about America's direction today, which is funny because they are at the helm of America today, and they've been driving America into a ditch. Okay, so traditional liberals, 11% of the population, tend to be cautious, rational, and idealistic. They value tolerance and compromise. They place great faith in institutions. These people are the reason that America is in the mess it's in. Valuing tolerance has not been a good thing for America. It's been very, very bad, where Americans have valued tolerance to such an extent that they even tolerate groups that will work to overthrow the tolerant system. And that's what we've had, where America, if you think of nation states as a living organism, America has not had the immune response it needs to hostile takeovers that it should have, that any organism should have. And it's because this tolerance has turned off the immune response to hostile takeovers by bad faith actors, people who do not want to trust and cooperate. And they talk about compromise. That's another. Compromise is not a good word. It's not the good thing that you think it is. I prefer win-win cooperation, which is something the Chinese also highly value. Compromise can be gamed very easily. Compromise means if you and a bad faith actor, a villain, disagree on something, you meet halfway. Or you meet somewhere slightly in the middle where both of you are not particularly happy. But the thing is, they can come back and do that again and again and again. And suddenly, you find yourself going from, let's say they are a 0 on something and you're 100 on something. The first compromise puts you at 50. Then they say, okay, we're at 50, but we really want to be at 0 because they were at 0 to begin with. And they're like, okay, well, you're at 0, now we're at 50, let's compromise again and be at 25. And then it's at compromise again, 12.5. And so what they do is they just push the envelope over and over and over again, because these traditional liberals who were historically for a while in power, they were willing to compromise over and over and over again on things that should have been core values. And they thought by compromising, they would eventually reach some sort of agreement, even if they're dissatisfied with the agreement. But the people working against them, the bad faith actors who are mostly the progressive activists earlier that we talked about, they were willing to continue pushing things over and over and over again. So let's see, this next group, passive liberals, 15% of the population tend to feel isolated from their communities. They're insecure in their beliefs and try to avoid political conversations. They have a fatalistic view of politics and feel that the circumstances of their lives are beyond their control. What do I think of this group? Well, they are right to feel isolated from their communities because there is no, or there's very minimal unifying factors in America. I talked about this back when I was in America too with some friends, where it's like, what do Americans actually have in common anymore? When you think about it, it's like they sometimes agree on their favorite sports team, and that's pretty much it. They don't go to the same religious institutions. They don't have the same fundamental beliefs because they don't have the same religions. They don't typically have ethnicity in common anymore in America. They don't have just anything you could think of that used to be a unifying force in a society. Americans don't have that in common. And so what is pushing people together as Americans is it's typically been the trashy media that everyone's like, oh, I want to be an American. I want to opt into being an American. And that's not working anymore because Americans just don't like American media to a very large extent anymore. And so people are looking around and saying, well, I actually feel very isolated because I don't feel like I'm an American. I don't feel like these other people are Americans, or I don't feel like I have much in common with these people. And so then you have to question, what does it mean to be an American? And I don't think people have a good idea about what it means to be an American anymore. They might think that their specific tribe are the real Americans, but that tribe that they're a part of, as we can see from all these tribes, is very small portions of the population. And if you see it, there are 7, I think they said 7 different tribes here. So another thing to consider is how ingrained are these tribes? Is it something that we kind of surface level believe, or is it like a core part of America at this point? And if you look at things like natural disasters and wars, typically if a society has core things in common, core beliefs, even if there's superficial differences, there's a rally around the flag effect where people tend to group together and collaborate more. And so during the COVID pandemic, if at their core people did feel like they were the same, they would have got together more. But what we found was at their absolute core, they disagreed with each other. They really didn't like each other. And so they actually disagreed even more because they started to have an in-group that was separate from Americans as a whole. So anyways, let's see what else we think here. Passive liberals, they have a fatalistic view of politics and feel that the circumstances of their lives are beyond their control. I feel some degree of sympathy for that, particularly the younger generations, because this was something that the baby boomers caused all of these problems. They really did, and they're still at the helm of things. They haven't died yet. So there's nothing younger generations can really do here. And yeah, the circumstances of their lives are pretty definitively beyond their control, especially if they're younger. Okay, so the politically disengaged. Well, this is concerning because, wait, let me just see. Yeah, this is the largest group. The politically disengaged is the largest group. It's 26% of the population. So over a quarter of the American population are untrusting, suspicious about external threats, conspiratorially minded, and pessimistic about progress. They typically say, and I haven't really looked into this, but they say you only need like 2% of the population to believe something to like have like an overthrow of the government, or it's like 2 to 10%. I hear different numbers all the time, but 26%, over a quarter of Americans, are untrusting, suspicious about external threats, conspiratorially minded, and pessimistic about progress. They tend to be patriotic, yet detached from politics. Okay, so that should be very concerning for you. Over a quarter of Americans don't trust America. They are suspicious about external threats, but when you look at it, external threats is anything that is not a part of their core community, and they consider themselves a separate tribe from these other groups. Conspiratorially minded, well, how conspiratorially minded do you need to be in modern America? Because all the conspiracies people believe in seem to be coming true over and over and over again. I'm not going to get into some of them, but if you look into quite a few conspiracies, they've turned out to be accurate in recent times. And so not all of them, obviously. Some people believe weird conspiracies, and oftentimes the intelligence community will plant some really out there conspiracies to delegitimize the actual conspiracies that are occurring. But if you have over a quarter of your population that is conspiratorially minded, they think that the elites are satanic, they think there's a deep state that controls everything. They think they're oligarchical run. They think it's a Zionist-occupied government. If you have over a quarter of Americans who believe this, you are in a lot of trouble. And this is the part that frustrates me. It goes on to say they tend to be patriotic yet detached from politics. So here's the frustrating thing. I understand the detached from politics thing because neither side, the Republicans or Democrats, really are for you at this point. But calling yourself patriotic, this is what I wish this group would get away from, which is if your country hates you, it's trying to replace you, it's trying to bring people in to threaten your communities, it's trying to create a hostile atmosphere for you, it's trying to discriminate against you when it comes to jobs. You don't need to call yourself an American anymore because your government, the American government, hates you. It wants you gone. Okay? So it frustrates me because I know a lot of people like this that fall into this group. They still consider themselves patriotic Americans, but they don't realize that everything about modern day America wants you gone. And so I wish this politically disengaged group would quit considering themselves patriotic because there's nothing to be patriotic towards. The government hates you. Okay? So moderates, 15% of the population, are engaged in their communities, well-informed and civic-minded. Their faith is often an important part of their lives. They shy away from extremism of any sort. These people are very frustrating to deal with. They're also similar to the compromisers we talked about earlier, the passive liberals, where they just let things deteriorate and they don't take active stands against things, where I think this is a part where Christians tend to fall into, where they think, and I've actually met people like this. I actually knew a philosophy professor who was a Christian who he believed it was his life mission to sacrifice himself and other white people for the sins of previous white people, the ancestors of current white people. And I'm not joking. This was a professor at a decently well-respected academic institution. And these people, they really are as passive as possible, and they don't have a response to evil. They really don't. They see evil and they think that their response should be to not fight against it. And so I don't have a particularly high opinion of moderates. I'm not going to get into more detail about that, though. Traditional conservatives, 19% of the population, tend to be religious, patriotic, highly moralistic. Again, I don't understand the patriotic thing. This is what I'm not understanding about both this group and the politically disengaged. Why would you be patriotic to a government, to a nation state that despises you? This is what a problem I have with the modern right of America, where they're like, woo, woo, I'm an American. And it's like, but your government hates you. What you think it means to be an American is not what it actually means to be an American. I'm sorry. I wish it was different. That's not the case, though. Okay. And then religious. See, here's the thing. If you believe in moral absolutism and that your fundamental core beliefs are important, you should be trying to challenge evil throughout the world. And the thing is, modern organized religion just does not anymore. They're very, very passive. Highly moralistic. They believe deeply in personal responsibility and self-reliance. Again, these libertarian beliefs, I'm not against self-reliance, but the libertarian beliefs that are very pervasive throughout America is very frustrating because any cohesive collectivistic group can outcompete any individual. And we know this from just like looking at animals, where a pack of animals can take out a significantly larger animal that is not working with a pack, okay? That's why cohesive packs exist throughout the animal kingdom. And so the fact that these traditional conservatives do not have a collectivistic mindset is really hurting them. So then it goes on to say devoted conservatives, 6% of the population, are deeply engaged with politics and hold strident, uncompromising views. They feel that America is embattled, and they perceive themselves as the last defenders of traditional values that are under threat. Yeah, I definitely see this. I don't see the point of being deeply engaged in politics anymore, though, because it's very obvious the system is corrupted to such an extent that there's no reason to actually vote. There's no reason to participate in American politics because it is a rigged system that is rigged. The laws are created, the system is created to benefit the oligarchs. And so I don't see the point of being deeply politically engaged. Okay. Okay, so it goes on to say progressive activists and devoted conservatives comprise just 14% of the population, but they're the two groups that feel like they're the largest. Okay, so if you add in traditional conservatives, they compose 33% of the population. Okay. What does this say? The wings are also the most unified internally on many of the most contentious issues: race, immigration, guns, LGBTQI rights. People in these three tribes express high levels of unanimity. Often more than 90% of people in one of these groups hold the same view about controversial issues, and typically will be the reverse of the opposing wing view. Okay. Dominate. Okay, so they're just talking about the wings dominating politics here. Okay, so let's see what this says. Oh, okay. So this is a little bit interesting. Looking at the gender breakdown here, men and women have different roles. Okay, so 91% of devoted conservatives believes that. 15% of progressive activists believe that. Okay, so very deeply divided there. Men start off with an advantage. A lot of people believe that. This is something that is patently false. Men starting off with an advantage. You do see a lot of men at the top tiers of society because they're willing to sacrifice everything to be at the top of the dominance competence hierarchies, okay? But if you look at the average man, it's something like 1/3 of American males are just opting out of society at this point. And if you look at K through 12 education, higher education, men are just leaving society. They're not working, they're not training, they're not getting education, just across the board. And it's very frustrating to see this where the progressive activists, 91% think men start off with an advantage. That's so patently false given everything we know about the data. When you look at things like the wage gap, it's obviously caused by other factors, which they refuse to take into account because you can control for variables in your studies, but they just refuse to do that. So men do not start off with an advantage. There's a ton of historical reasons. There's there's a ton of research on this, I should say, that shows that men start off at a disadvantage, and that disadvantage does not go away for the vast majority of men throughout their lifespan. They die earlier. They do not go to higher education at as high of a rate. All kinds of things going on, but men do not have an advantage starting off. It's quantifiable. I'm sorry if you disagree with me. You are wrong. You are definitively wrong. Hard work will always lead to success. Devoted conservatives believe that. I don't believe that. Okay, so here's where I disagree. So the first two, I agreed with the devoted conservatives, but hard work will always lead to success. That is not the case. We know this from studies, and we know that hard work is not rewarded as well in America as in other countries throughout the world. Okay, I'll just go on. So government should take more responsibility to ensure everyone is provided for. Okay, so this is actually, again, another part. See, I don't fall into either of these categories particularly well. I actually agree with the progressive activists here that government should take more responsibility to ensure everyone is provided for. I've talked about this in other videos with things like education and healthcare, because I do believe in equal opportunity. Those things should be absolutely taken care for. If other people have to pay for that to give people equal footing and an equal chance at things, then absolutely that should be the case. I remember reading Stefan Molyneux's book about how they're, I think it was like an anarcho-capitalistic society, they were willing to intervene when parents were being neglectful or abusive towards children, but they also disagreed with providing that child with healthcare and education. So if a parent, and this is the contradiction I've never been able to resolve from Stefan Molyneux's book or his thoughts on this topic, is you're willing to intervene if a parent is not feeding a child properly, but then you also don't think that anyone should be obligated to feed that child if the parents are not feeding the child. So you're willing to intervene, you're willing to murder the parents if they're not feeding the child, but then you're also willing to just let the child die because you don't think that people have a right to food within a society. People have to, of their own volition, decide to give that child food, and it's not a requirement of the society to provide that food. So just something that I saw as a very complete contradiction here. So I obviously agree with the progressive activists here. So let's see. Okay, so this is another thing that I think it's so absurd for both of these groups to be this high. Devoted conservatives, 91% are proud to be an American. Why would you be proud to be an American when devoted conservatives, the American government, American society is very hostile towards you? Why would you be proud to be an American? Their conception of American is not based on the reality of modern America. It's based on a figment of their imagination. They think that their group is the true America, and so that's what it means to be American. That is not the case. All institutions are controlled by people who absolutely hate you. Okay, so going on, it says, I'm not proud of my country's history. 60% versus 5%. I don't really have strong feelings on this. I think it's good to look at history for examples of what to do and what not to do, but we also have to consider that our current situation is different from history, and so you don't just implement things wholesale because it worked in the past. So I don't really have much of an opinion on that. Okay, so they just continue talking about the wings. I'm just gonna skip ahead. What is this? No, I don't really care about that. Okay, anything else we hear about? Okay, so it talks about specific issues here. Our research shows genuine tension between people's desire for America to be open and inclusive and their desire for it to be safe and secure. Okay. They don't go into real details here like I would like. Oh, here they go into some percentages. 69% of Americans believe that we have become too sensitive to issues of race, and a near unanimous 85% think that the race should not be a factor in college admissions. It is definitively a factor in college admissions. I know this. I've worked with admissions before, and they absolutely do consider it. They shouldn't consider it, but that is what they do in a lot of cases. 60% of Americans believe that white supremacists are a growing threat in America. I disagree with them. We can skip some of this. They don't go into the percentages I would like to see here. Okay. consistency across issues. All right, so tribe membership shows strong reliability in predicting views across different political topics. So that's interesting because what we saw earlier is I don't really have anything, well, I don't have a majority of my beliefs in common with any specific tribe. I disagree with them. And I think I have a cohesive reason for disagreeing on certain topics and agreeing on other topics with these groups. Part of being a part of a group is you will agree with them on essentially every topic in order to amplify your collective power as a cohesive group. And I'm just not willing to do that. Okay. So they go on to talk about perceived threats, group identity and tribalism, different parenting styles. Okay. Moral foundations of fairness and cheating, care and harm. Yeah, okay. Okay, this might be a little bit interesting. So I will try to look at this. So this is looking at the 5 different types of moral foundation: authority, care, fairness, loyalty, and purity. So in terms of purity, the progressive activists do not consider purity at all, which is kind of interesting because in terms of purity of beliefs, they've actually become very fundamentalist, particularly in academia, where you have to like write up diversity, equity, inclusion statements now. It's interesting because so the interesting thing here is looking at this, it's very obvious that some of these groups actually consider every moral foundation, and then other groups don't consider some moral foundations. So I think that's what I'm going to focus on here, which is the more left-leaning you are in terms of the American political spectrum, it looks like the less likely you are to consider things like authority, loyalty, and purity to be important. But everyone considers things like fairness and care to be important. So really, that's the contentious issues. I actually think authority is very important. It's important to have a direction for a group, for a nation state, for a tribe, et cetera, et cetera. It's about having the right authority, and modern American authority is just doing a terrible, terrible, terrible job right now. So I'm not surprised that some people are very disenchanted with authority. In terms of loyalty and purity, I think the left-leaning people are not being honest about how much they believe in purity. They believe in different types of purity than right-leaning people. And maybe it's the case that the questions that were asked of these people deal with more right-leaning versions of purity, but they definitely have kind of purity tests for left-leaning people. So I don't know about that. And then when it comes to loyalty, I think this is actually maybe the most important issue here, which is left-leaning people don't think you should be loyal to each other. They don't believe in loyalty. So let's go back up and look at this definition. Loyalty, betrayal, standing with one's group, family, or nation. Okay, so they do not believe in any sort of loyalty to family, group, nation. Okay, and as you can probably imagine, not having loyalty to the nation is going to be bad for the cohesion of the nation. Okay, and so you can't build a functioning society off of how they view left-leaning beliefs in America. So they've done actual statistical studies on this, dimension reduction techniques, and they found that just what I would say is objectively, you cannot build a functioning society off of left-leaning beliefs because you would have to have some degree of loyalty to something. And so that's why left-leaning beliefs concern me more than right-leaning beliefs, because even if the right-leaning people have things that I would consider wrong in their belief system, they at least still could form a functioning nation. Whereas if you don't believe in loyalty, you cannot form a functioning nation. That is the core of a nation. You have to have some degree of loyalty to the nation, the tribe. Okay, let's see what else they have to say here. Anything? I think that's a good stopping point. I don't really think we need to go over any more of this. I've already talked for like 40 minutes. So this was a really interesting read. I know it was long. I'm sorry for that, but this was really interesting. I would encourage you to spend a little bit more time thinking about the 7 tribes, I think it was, of modern America. What tribe do you fit in? Why do you fit in that? What are the beliefs you have in common with that tribe? Do you actually believe everything everything the tribe believes, or is it that you're just believing it because that's the rest of what your tribe members believe? I, as we talked about, don't fall neatly into any of the 7 categories, but if I had to choose a side, it would be the right-leaning side in this case because of things like the loyalty moral foundation being necessary for building a society. I don't talk about this often, but like my core overriding belief is, or maybe you can consider a set of beliefs, is I care about the advancement of humanity and that every generation is better off than prior generations. So there needs to be a degree of self-sacrifice for prior generations in order to make things better for future generations, because prior generations have sacrificed for us, aside from the baby boomers, who are just the most morally repugnant group that the world has ever seen. And I'm talking specifically about American baby boomers and Western baby boomers in general there. But yeah, those are my core overriding beliefs. And so I don't really feel like I align with any of these groups, but again, right-leaning groups, I think, have a more cohesive take, a more likely successful take on what it takes to build a functioning society. So anyways, that's what I'll leave you with. If you stuck through this entire 40-some minutes of this video, I'm very impressed with you. I'm very proud of you. Leave us a thumbs up if you got to this point. You might as well show me that you got to this point, because that's pretty impressive. Subscribe to our channel on YouTube and Rumble for more content. For some reason, Rumble is not updating as frequently as I would like, because it should be syncing every single day. It's just not been doing that. So very unfortunate, because I would like to transition to Rumble eventually. YouTube is clearly suppressing us in the algorithm, and so I want to have those backups if necessary. Please tell other people about our channel through word of mouth. We are being, as I said, suppressed in the algorithm, and so any marketing, any publicity you can give to our channel, people that you think might have their eyes open due to the content we're covering, we would appreciate that. We do have other ways of marketing, but again, we just appreciate any help you can provide us. And leave us a comment in the comment section below. I do read all of them. I respond when it seems like it's necessary. Thank you for watching, and I hope you have a good rest of